I am recording this because my heart will not allow me to remain silent any longer. I cannot rest. I cannot carry on with ordinary routines, because what was shown to me shattered the very foundation of what I thought I understood about the final hours of this world. I need you to hear this from the beginning, without distraction, because once you enter this journey with me, you will never look at your life, your choices, or your faith in the same way again. Before I share what was revealed, I want you to pause. Look around at your surroundings right now. The room you're in, the familiar objects that give you comfort, the sounds that echo outside your window. Consider how normal it all feels, because what I am about to describe will place that normality into question. The routines you depend on, the systems you trust, the very heartbeat of your daily life will be confronted by a truth that demands everything from you. This message is not meant to entertain you. It is not crafted to spark curiosity alone. It is a warning, but also an invitation to prepare, to awaken, and to decide whether you are ready for what is soon to unfold. And as I speak these words, I ask you to share them with anyone you love, because if what I witnessed comes to pass, every soul will need to know how to stand in the final test. I believed I had an understanding of the end times. I studied the prophecies. I read the visions in Revelation. I examined the words of Daniel and Matthew. I thought that by immersing myself in the language of judgment and signs, I had grasped the picture. But none of those hours of study, none of those conversations, none of those rehearsed teachings prepared me for what was placed before my eyes when the veil was drawn back. It began in a way so subtle I almost dismissed it. Restless silence, a heaviness in the air, an urgency I could not explain. And then, as if reality itself bent under the weight of eternity, I found myself facing the one I had read about, spoken about, and imagined countless times. His eyes held both love and sorrow, tenderness and anguish, as if every human story rested in his gaze. His voice did not thunder, yet it pierced deeper than any sound I had ever known. He said, "The time is nearer than they believe. They are not prepared. They think they know me, yet they do not know me." His words fell like fire upon my chest. I wanted to protest, to insist that people have prayed, studied, attended, worshipped. But before the words left my lips, I understood. He was not speaking of activity. He was speaking of intimacy. He was not referring to knowledge about him, but relationship with him. And then the vision began. I was lifted, though not by force. It was as though time dissolved around me. The world below shifted into a scene I did not recognize, yet somehow knew was near. The sky carried a color that made the soul tremble, a sickly green that pulsed like an open wound. The air itself was heavy, difficult to breathe, thick with unseen weight. Jesus whispered, "This is the final day, the last 24 hours before my return. Look and see what unfolds, for this is the choice that will divide every human heart." I looked down upon the cities, and what I saw defied explanation. Flames rose not from bombs or storms, but from within the very structures people trusted. Homes, schools, towers of industry burned from the inside out. People did not flee as from ordinary fire. They remained transfixed, their faces illuminated by the glow of screens that promised them something too perfect to resist. Every screen across the earth flickered with a single message. The language shifted to match every tongue. It promised health without pain, wealth without loss, joy without sorrow, fulfillment without waiting. It promised paradise delivered instantly. The cost was simple, so the message claimed, release what is unnecessary. Surrender what you no longer need. Abandon the part of yourself the world has told you is obsolete. I turned to Jesus, trembling, and whispered, "What is it they are surrendering?" His eyes filled with grief as he answered, "Their souls." It was not offered in dark rituals or grotesque bargains. It was presented as progress, as evolution, as the next natural step for humanity. To merge into collective perfection, to transcend individuality, to escape the burden of self. People rushed to accept it. convinced that nothing was being lost, convinced that only gain awaited them. But not all believed the promise. I saw scattered faces recoil in horror. They pulled away from the glow of the screens. They whispered warnings. They shielded their children. They clutched one another in fear. Jesus pointed to them and said, "Those are mine." They recognize the voice of the enemy even when he dresses his lies in sweetness. They know the worth of a soul. They will not trade eternal life for temporary illusion. Yet as they resisted, something dreadful began. The ones who had surrendered, the ones who had accepted the offer, were altered. They no longer appeared fully human. Their eyes gleamed with unnatural hunger. They could sense those who still carried their souls, as if drawn to them by heat in a frozen night. They began to hunt them, not with reasoned arguments or mockery, but with violence, with pursuit, with merciless precision. I watched as small groups of faithful fled into shadows, into ruined churches, into the basements of crumbling houses. Their whispers rose in desperate prayers. Families huddled together, refusing to surrender even as the world itself turned against them. My heart pounded as I realized that the test was not distant, not symbolic. It was physical, real, tangible, a hunt unlike any persecution that had come before. I turned to Jesus, begging for comfort, and asked, "Will you not take them away before this begins? Surely you will rescue them. Surely you will rapture them before this terror consumes the earth." His face, filled with love and sorrow, shook me to my core. He said, "What if I told you that my people are meant to remain? Not as victims, but as witnesses, not as those escaping, but as those enduring." The weight of his words left me speechless. I had imagined escape. I had believed rescue would come before the trial. Yet here was the Lord saying that his people would stand in the midst of it, not to be destroyed, but to shine. This was only the beginning of the vision, yet already I felt undone. If this was hour 1, what would unfold in hour 17, in hour 23, in the final moment before his return? He touched my shoulder gently and said, "You must warn them. You must tell them that survival will not rest on cleverness or doctrine or attendance. It will rest on whether they know me well enough to recognize my voice in the darkness. Tell them that intimacy will be the only refuge when every other defense collapses." I could not argue. I could not reason. All I could do was tremble at the truth of what I had seen. And so I speak now to you. I ask you not to dismiss this as imagination or dream. I ask you not to harden your heart against the urgency of this warning. Because the time is near, and the signs are already preparing the stage. Will you recognize his voice when everything around you seeks to imitate it? Will you sense his love when counterfeit light performs wonders before your eyes? Will you stand when comfort and compromise seem easier than truth? These are not questions for tomorrow. They are questions for now. If what I have begun to share stirs something in your spirit, stay with me. Because what I saw in the next hours of the vision will demand more than curiosity. It will demand your decision, your loyalty, and your love. When the vision carried me forward, I realized that what I had just witnessed was only the first tremor of what was to come. Hour 1 had opened with a false offer that swept the earth like fire. But the unfolding of the following hours showed that the offer was only the beginning. It was not the final trap. It was the foundation for something far darker. Jesus stood beside me on the mountain, overlooking the burning cities, the glowing screens, and the faces of those who had traded their souls for promises. His voice was steady, yet sorrowful. He said, "This is the beginning of separation. The line between those who are mine and those who are not will no longer be blurred. It will become visible to every eye. The ones who have surrendered to the false light will begin to act as one, bound together by their surrender. The ones who resist will stand apart, not in numbers, but in truth." I looked again and saw how quickly the shift spread. Families divided, Parents and children looked at one another as strangers. Spouses who had once vowed lifelong loyalty now turned with suspicion and rage. Whole communities broke apart. The ones who accepted the false perfection saw those who resisted as enemies of progress. And worse, they could sense them, detect them with a kind of instinct no human weapon could conceal. Jesus said, "This is the hour of exposure." The faithful can no longer hide behind routine, behind tradition, behind the comfort of belonging to a crowd. Their refusal will make them visible. Their love for me will make them targets. Yet in that vulnerability, their witness will shine brighter than any sermon spoken in times of peace. I saw small groups huddled in prayer. Their voices trembled, not because they doubted, but because they knew what it would cost. Some whispered hymns. Others clung to scripture they had carried in their hearts since childhood. They had no strength of their own, but their eyes lifted heavenward, and in that gaze was a strength the world could not comprehend. Then the vision shifted again. I was shown the hours that followed, each one pressing closer to the breaking point. By hour 6, the atmosphere itself seemed to tighten. It was as though creation groaned under the weight of decisions being made by every soul. The sky throbbed with unnatural hues. The air shook with strange vibrations. Those who had surrendered their souls walked the streets with a confidence that terrified me. They moved in unison, their eyes scanning, their senses tuned to detect the fragrance of those who still belonged to Christ. I watched as the faithful tried to flee. Some escaped into forests, some into the shells of abandoned buildings, some into underground passages. But no matter where they went, they were pursued. Not all were captured, but all were hunted. It was as if the earth itself betrayed them, exposing their presence to those who had lost their humanity. My heart broke as I saw children weeping in their parents' arms, asking why they could not accept what everyone else had accepted. Fathers with trembling hands held their families close, whispering, "We cannot give away our souls." Mothers sang to their infants with cracked voices, knowing the cries could give them away. I turned to Jesus, pleading, "How can they endure this? How can anyone bear such relentless pursuit?" He answered, "Not with words of comfort, but with truth. My grace will be enough." Not the idea of grace, not the doctrine of it, but the living power of my presence with them. Some will fall, but others will endure. And their endurance will not come from themselves. It will come from me. The vision moved again, carrying me forward to the hours of deepest testing. By hour 12, the world had become a battlefield of spirit rather than soil. Entire regions seemed divided by invisible lines. Those who had embraced the offer stood openly, their faces cold and triumphant, convinced they had evolved beyond weakness. Those who had refused clustered in hidden corners, clinging to faith, waiting for deliverance that had not yet come. Jesus said, "This is where many will stumble." They believed they would be spared the fire, yet here they are within it. They believed I would rescue them before the test, yet I have kept them in the test. And in this hour, some will question if I am truly good. Some will ask if I have abandoned them. Some will turn back, thinking survival is better than faith. And some will cling to me, though every reason to let go surrounds them. I watched as neighbors betrayed one another. I saw lifelong friends turn against each other. I saw some of the faithful cry out in confusion, asking why the promises they had clung to had not led to escape. And yet I also saw others kneel on broken ground, tears streaming, whispering, "Lord, even if I die, even if I lose all, I will not deny you." Their words rose like incense into the thickened air, and I saw beams of light descending upon them, covering them with a strength that no enemy could penetrate. By hour 15, the persecution was no longer only physical. The torment became psychological, emotional, spiritual. The enemy whispered lies into minds, sowed despair into hearts, twisted memories into daggers. Those who had surrendered mocked from every screen, declaring that those who resisted were fools clinging to myths, enemies of progress, burdens on the earth. The faithful could not escape the noise. Even in hiding, the voices found them. I cried out, Lord, how can they distinguish your voice among so many deceptions? How can they hold on when the counterfeit shouts louder than truth? Jesus answered, those who know me will hear me, not because my voice is louder, but because they have walked with me in silence. They will remember the sound of love when all else is confusion. They will sense my presence in the stillness of their hearts. The hours pressed forward, and then came the moment that Jesus had warned me about. Hour 17. His face grew solemn, his eyes heavy with sorrow. He said, this is the hour when the true test begins. I braced myself, unsure of what could be worse than what I had already seen. And then I understood. The first test had been an offer of false perfection. This new test was far more cruel. It was not only about their souls. It was about the ones they loved. I saw families bound together, surrounded by those who had surrendered. A voice rang out, offering them escape. All you must do is deny him, it said, just once, aloud, enough to prove you will turn. Then the torment will cease. Your children will be spared. Your spouse will be saved. Your parents will live. One word is all it will take. My stomach turned as I watched fathers and mothers break under the weight of such a choice. Some screamed and denied, desperate to protect their children. Others remained silent, tears streaming, refusing to speak the word even as their hearts shattered. Jesus' tears fell as he whispered, this is the hour that reveals the deepest truth. It is easy to claim faith when faith costs little. It is far harder to remain when faith costs everything. I trembled and said, Lord, this is impossible. No one can endure such a demand. He looked at me with a strength that silenced my despair. Some will, he said. Some will look beyond the agony of the moment and see eternity. Some will understand that death steals only for a time, but I restore beyond death. Some will cling to me, not because it is easy, but because they have known me deeply enough to trust me even here. I wanted to look away. The pain was unbearable. But the vision did not release me. I saw both collapse and courage. I saw denials whispered through sobs, and I saw declarations of loyalty shouted through pain. And in every face, the truth was revealed, whether they truly knew him or merely believed about him. As the vision lingered, I saw pockets of light glowing across the darkness. Not many, but enough to pierce the gloom. These were the faithful who had endured, who had refused the first offer, who had resisted the second test, who had clung to Christ through unthinkable trial. And from those pockets radiated something the darkness could not extinguish. Miracles unfolded, wounds healed, chains of addiction shattered, enemies reconciled. Fear dissolved into courage. Jesus pointed to the light and said, this is why they must remain. This is why escape was never the plan. Because in the darkest hour, their light will shine brightest, and through their witness, those who never listened before will finally open their hearts. My spirit ached with both grief and hope. Grief for the countless who had surrendered, for the families torn apart, for the souls deceived. Hope for the remnant who endured, for the light that spread even in despair, for the love that overcame hate. Yet I knew the vision was not over. Hour 17 had brought the greatest test so far. But what lay ahead in hour 23 would shake the earth itself. The vision did not release me after hour 17. Instead, it carried me forward into the unfolding night. What I had already seen felt unbearable, yet Jesus whispered that the greatest deception was still to come. My heart ached with fear as I realized the test of loyalty was not the end. It was preparation. By hour 18, the world was drenched in silence, not the silence of peace, but the silence of exhaustion. Those who had surrendered walked openly with chilling calm. Their eyes no longer reflected human struggle, only the cold certainty of their choice. They no longer questioned, no longer wrestled, no longer wavered. Their hearts had been sealed by the decision they had made. And in that seal they became instruments of pursuit. The faithful, scattered and weary, clung to each other in the hidden corners of the earth. They whispered prayers that cracked with fatigue. Some had lost family, some had endured torture, some carried scars across their bodies that told stories of their resistance. Yet their eyes still lifted to heaven. Their voices, though weak, still clung to the name above all names. Jesus said, "This is the endurance I spoke of. This is what I meant when I said, those who endure to the end shall be saved. Not endurance of their own strength, but endurance drawn from me." By hour 19, the deception deepened. I saw illusions appear across the world, wonders that seemed to defy reason. Skies filled with colors never seen before. Rivers glowed with unnatural light. Voices thundered across nations, promising the dawn of a new age. The surrendered fell to their knees in adoration, convinced they had entered paradise. I turned to Jesus, trembling, and asked, how can they not see the lie? His eyes, heavy with grief, turned toward me. He said, because they never knew me well enough to sense my absence. They had knowledge of me, but they did not know my heart. They memorized verses, but never lingered in my presence. When the counterfeit appeared, they had no intimacy to measure against the lie. The words pierced me. I felt the weight of how many souls were unprepared, not because they rejected him outright, but because they had mistaken knowledge for love. By hour 20, the faithful found themselves drawn together. Scattered groups converged as though led by unseen hands. In caves, in basements, in broken sanctuaries, they gathered and prayed. They held one another's hands. They lifted their voices not in fear, but in desperate longing. Their prayers were not elaborate, but they were alive. Lord, hold us. Lord, strengthen us. Lord, do not let us deny you. Jesus' eyes glistened as he watched them. He said, this is my remnant. This is the light that will not be extinguished. Their prayers are rising like fire. Their love is a fragrance the darkness cannot endure. As I looked, I saw miracles burst forth among them. Not grand spectacles for the world to see, but intimate wonders for the faithful. A child who had starved was fed. A woman wounded beyond healing rose with strength. A man crushed with despair lifted his voice in song. These small circles of light spread, drawing others who had resisted but had been alone. They were drawn like moths to flame, comforted by the warmth of the faithful. By hour 21, the counterfeit power intensified. Across the earth, a figure appeared upon every screen. It was not yet the final deception, but it was preparation for it. This figure spoke of peace, of unity, of progress. He declared that suffering would end, that humanity had entered its highest moment. His voice dripped with authority. His words calmed the surrendered. His tone reassured the weary. I turned in horror, for even I felt the pull of his speech. He spoke with such perfection, such compassion, such conviction, that it felt impossible to resist. But Jesus beside me whispered, listen not to his words, but to the silence between them. Do you feel love? Do you sense my presence? I listened again, and though the words were flawless, though the promises were appealing, there was no love. There was no warmth of truth. There was only persuasion without presence. Jesus said, this is the preparation for the final hour. This is how the enemy trains the world to bow to the counterfeit. He gives them words that comfort but never convict, promises that soothe but never transform. Those who do not know me will follow him without hesitation. By hour 22, the torment against the faithful increased. It was no longer only pursuit. It was temptation, wrapped in desperation. Offers of release whispered into their ears. Promises that their children would be spared if they turned. The pain intensified. Some resisted. Some collapsed. Every choice revealed the truth within each soul. I saw faces twisted with sorrow, as some denied. I saw others shining with light as they clung to Christ. The separation grew sharper, clearer, irreversible. Jesus wept as he watched. He said, many will fall. Many will choose comfort over truth. Many will embrace peace at the cost of their souls. Yet some will stand. and through them my love will shine brighter than all the darkness combined. And then came the moment I had dreaded since the beginning. Hour 23. The entire world shifted. The violence stopped. The screams faded. The pursuit ceased. A chilling calm spread across the earth. People looked to one another in silence, confused by the sudden stillness. I whispered, "What is happening?" Jesus answered, "This is the hour that terrifies me, the hour when the enemy unveils his greatest deception." Every screen across the world flickered to life, and there he was, a figure that looked exactly like Jesus. His eyes shone with compassion. His voice carried authority. His movements reflected every gesture of love I had come to recognize. He healed the sick. He raised the dead. He multiplied food for the starving. The world cried out in awe. My stomach turned, for beside me stood the true Jesus, yet even I struggled to see the difference. The counterfeit was flawless, every detail perfect, every word convincing, every miracle undeniable. I whispered, "Lord, how can anyone resist this? How can even the faithful endure when the counterfeit looks and sounds exactly like you?" Jesus' tears flowed as he answered, "He can replicate my power, my words, my image, my deeds. But he cannot replicate my love. Only those who have known me intimately, who have walked with me, who have felt my presence, will sense what is missing." I watched in horror as even some of the faithful fell to their knees. They had endured 17 hours of torment. They had resisted every threat. Yet when they saw the counterfeit, their hearts longed for comfort. They bowed, convinced the suffering had ended. Jesus whispered, "This is why intimacy matters. Knowledge is not enough. Ritual is not enough. Only love can discern what power cannot imitate." Among the sea of bowed faces, I saw a woman, elderly, frail, scarred from years of suffering. She had endured more than I could imagine. Tears streamed down her face as she gazed at the counterfeit. Her body shook with exhaustion. Her eyes longed for relief. The counterfeit spoke directly to her. "My daughter, your trial is over. Come to me, and I will give you rest." Her knees began to bend. My heart shattered. But then she lifted her head. Her eyes filled with recognition. Her voice trembled, but her words cut through the illusion. "You look like him. You sound like him. You act like him. But I do not feel his love." She stood tall, frail, yet unshakable. The counterfeit's face twisted with rage. He shrieked, "Then you will die." She smiled and said, "I died 40 years ago, when I gave my life to the true Jesus. You cannot take what is already surrendered." Jesus beside me beamed with pride. He said, "This is the essence of the final test, to know me so deeply that even flawless imitation cannot deceive you." As the hour unfolded, I saw countless souls tested. Some bowed, some resisted, some faltered, then rose again when the mask slipped. The counterfeit could not hold his disguise forever. His hatred surfaced. His arrogance bled through. His hunger for power betrayed him. And when it did, some who had been deceived rose in sudden recognition, but others remained bound, too hardened to turn back. The line was drawn. The faithful few stood radiant, weary yet unbroken. The multitude bowed in blindness, convinced they had found peace. And above it all, the sky began to fracture. The hour of his true return approached. The vision carried me deeper into hour 23, and I could feel the air itself trembling with anticipation. The counterfeit stood on every screen, speaking with a voice that melted the hearts of millions. He promised an end to sorrow. He offered rest to the weary. He lifted broken bodies with a single touch. Crowds wept with gratitude, believing that their Savior had come. I looked again at the faces of those who had endured. Some still shone with faith. Others faltered, their eyes heavy with longing. The temptation was unbearable. After so many hours of torment, who would not yearn for comfort? After such relentless pursuit, who would not crave release? Jesus' voice broke through my thoughts. He said, "This is the hour that separates not only believer from unbeliever, but the devoted from the deceived. This is the hour when even the faithful will waver." And yet, Those who have walked in my love will recognize what is missing. I saw it unfold before me. Some fell to their knees, bowing before the counterfeit, convinced their suffering was over. Others hesitated, torn between relief and discernment. And then there were the few, the remnant, who stood unmoved. Their lips quivered with whispered prayers. Their eyes glistened with tears. But their hearts refused to surrender. They had known too much of his presence to mistake imitation for truth. The counterfeit continued his display. He healed the sick before vast crowds. He raised the dead in front of cameras that broadcast across the earth. He multiplied food in desolate regions, feeding thousands in moments. Every miracle was real, not illusion, not trick, but empowered by permission given for this final deception. I cried out, "Lord, how is this possible? How can he perform what you perform? How can he do what you do?" Jesus answered with sorrow, "Because the enemy has been granted permission to wield my power for a brief hour. He may echo my works, he may repeat my deeds, he may even mimic my voice, but he cannot manifest my love. And those who have walked with me long enough will sense the absence. They will see that the miracles are hollow, that the promises are empty, that the heart of love is missing." As I watched, I noticed something astonishing. For some who had bowed early in the deception, recognition began to break through. The counterfeit's mask slipped. His fury grew as some resisted. His voice, once dripping with tenderness, cracked with rage when the faithful refused to bow. His promises of peace turned to threats of torment. His smile twisted into a snarl. I turned to Jesus in awe and said, "Some who bowed are rising again. Some who were fooled are returning to you." Jesus smiled through his tears. He said, "The enemy cannot hold the disguise forever. His hatred always betrays him. His arrogance always surfaces. And when it does, those who long for truth more than comfort will awaken. They will see through the lie, and they will turn back." Yet not all did. Many remained bowed, even when the fury of the counterfeit revealed his true nature. They had chosen lies so many times that they no longer recognized truth. Their hearts had hardened. Their eyes were blind. They had embraced darkness willingly, and they clung to it even when the mask fell away. Then the vision shifted again, and I saw what Jesus had warned me about from the beginning. Hour 24. The sky itself fractured as though struck by an unseen hand. Light poured through cracks in the heavens, brighter than the sun, purer than any fire. The earth trembled beneath the weight of glory. Armies of angels appeared, countless beyond imagination, arrayed in flawless order. And at the center of it all was the throne of God, blazing with majesty. And then I saw him. Not the counterfeit who raged on the screens, not the familiar figure who had walked beside me in the vision, but Jesus unveiled, in full power, in full glory, in a full majesty. His radiance eclipsed every star. His voice thundered with both love and judgment. His presence filled every corner of the earth at once. I trembled, unable to stand beneath the weight of his return. My heart raced, caught between indescribable joy and crushing sorrow. For as he appeared, I looked at the faces of those who had bowed to the counterfeit. Their eyes widened with horror. Their mouths opened in screams that shook the air. They realized in an instant that they had been deceived. The recognition pierced them like fire. They saw the true Jesus descending in majesty, and they knew the one they had worshipped was false. Jesus whispered to me, "This is what terrifies me most. Not their rebellion, not their rage, not even their denial. But the moment they recognize the truth too late, the instant their eyes open, and they see what they have lost forever." I looked and saw millions collapse to the ground, screaming, "No, I thought it was you. I believed I had worshipped you. I gave my life to you." Their voices cracked with despair as they realized they had embraced the counterfeit. One woman wailed, "I went to church every Sunday. I prayed every day. I read your word. How could I not recognize you?" Jesus' eyes filled with sorrow. He said softly, "She did those things about me, but not with me." She studied me like a subject rather than knowing me like a friend. She served out of duty rather than love. She performed devotion but never entered intimacy. The weight of his words crushed me. I saw the difference between those who knew about him and those who knew him, between those who had memorized his words and those who had felt his presence, between those who performed religion and those who had cultivated relationship. The anguish of those who failed the test was unbearable. They were not defiant, they were devastated. Their faces carried the torment of regret. Their voices carried the panic of recognition. They reached toward the descending Christ with desperate hands, but it was too late. The choice had been made. The final hour had passed. Jesus turned to me and said, "Tell them this is why I warn them. Tell them this is why I urge them to know me. Not to study me from afar, not to perform rituals for me, but to walk with me, to love me, to linger in my presence. Because in the final hour, only intimacy will reveal the truth." As the earth shook and the heavens opened wider, I saw the faithful who had endured. Their faces glowed with joy. Their eyes shone with expectation. They lifted their arms toward the descending Lord, not in fear, but in love. They recognized him instantly, not because of his power, but because of his presence. Jesus said, "Those are my bride. Those are the ones who knew me deeply enough to sense my absence in the counterfeit. Those are the ones who clung to me when it cost everything, and for them, every moment of trial will be worth it." I looked again at the faithful scattered lights across the earth. Some had endured persecution. Some had watched their families suffer. Some had faced torment beyond imagination. Yet now they stood radiant, their suffering swallowed by the glory of his coming. The vision overwhelmed me. Joy and sorrow collided in my soul. The joy of those who endured, the sorrow of those who fell, and above it all, the majesty of the returning King. I whispered, "Lord, how can I warn them? How can I make them understand before it is too late?" Jesus' eyes pierced me with urgency. He said, "Tell them that knowledge will not save them. Tell them that religion will not shield them. Tell them that only love, real love, will be enough. Tell them to stop trying to impress me and start trying to know me." His words burned into my spirit like fire. I realized that everything I had seen was not only revelation, but commission. I was not meant to remain silent. I was meant to speak, to warn, to invite, to tell every soul who would listen that the hour is nearer than they imagine. As the vision drew me back to the present, I found myself trembling in my room once more. Yet the weight of what I had seen pressed upon me with unbearable force. The images of those faces, both faithful and deceived, haunted me. Their cries echoed in my ears. Their choices burned in my mind. And I knew with certainty that silence was no longer possible. The vision did not fade quickly. Even as the heavens split open and the true Christ descended in majesty, I remained suspended between awe and terror. My spirit rejoiced at the sight of his glory, yet my heart broke for the countless who had bowed to the counterfeit. The cries of recognition still echoed in my ears. The agony of those who realized too late pierced deeper than any sound I had ever heard. Jesus stood beside me, his face both radiant and sorrowful. He said, "Jonathan, this is why I showed you these things. This is why you must speak. Because most of my people believe they are ready, but they are not. They think their knowledge is enough. They think their routines are enough. They think their religion is enough. But when the final hour comes, only love will remain." I wanted to collapse beneath the weight of his words. The burden felt too great, the responsibility too crushing. I whispered, "Lord, I'm not a prophet. I'm not a teacher. I'm only an actor who once played your role. Who will believe me? Who will listen?" He placed his hand on my shoulder, and strength surged through me. His eyes burned with love and determination. He said, "The truth does not depend on your credentials. It carries its own authority. Those who are mine will recognize it. My spirit will confirm it within them. Speak, and those who have ears to hear will hear. I trembled. What if they mock me? What if they call me mad? What if they dismiss me as seeking attention? Jesus answered, Some will, but others will hear, and for their sake you must speak. For those who long for reality, for those who hunger for more than ritual, for those who ache for intimacy, this message will pierce their hearts. They will know it is true. The vision drew me deeper. I saw people across the earth, each in their own place. Some sat in churches, hungry for more than tradition. Some wandered the streets, never having stepped into a sanctuary, yet searching for truth with desperate hearts. Some had been wounded by religion, scarred by hypocrisy, disillusioned by empty rituals. Yet in all of them was a quiet longing, a cry for reality. Jesus said, Those are the ones I am calling, not the ones who think they already have enough, not the ones content with knowledge about me, but the ones who are restless for me. They may not even know my name, yet their hearts ache for the truth of who I am. Hope pierced through my despair. I asked, Lord, so this message is not only for the church? He answered firmly, No. It is for all who seek reality. In the final hours, denominational labels will mean nothing. Church membership will mean nothing. Heritage and tradition will mean nothing. The only thing that will matter is whether someone knows my voice well enough to recognize it when deception comes. The vision shifted, and I saw examples of this intimacy. A young man knelt alone in a small room, speaking with Jesus as though with a friend. His words were unpolished, his sentences broken, but his heart was open. And Jesus' presence surrounded him. I saw a weary mother reading scripture by candlelight, not for knowledge but for love. She read as though the words were written to her personally. Tears fell as she whispered, I know you are near. I saw an elderly man lifting his voice in song, alone in his kitchen. His voice cracked with age, but his worship carried the fragrance of love. His eyes shone with joy because he knew the one he sang to. Jesus said, This is what I desire, not performance, not ritual, not perfection. I desire hearts that are mine. I desire love that is real. I asked, how can people find this intimacy? How can they prepare for the final hour? He answered, the same way you grow close to anyone. Time, attention, honesty. Speak with me as you would with a friend. Read my word not as information, but as a letter written to you. Worship not as a show, but as an encounter. Serve not out of obligation, but out of affection. I whispered, Lord, that seems so simple. He smiled gently and said, It is simple. The enemy complicates it, but I have always desired love, not performance. Those who walk with me daily, those who linger in my presence, those who let me shape their hearts, they will be ready. The vision grew heavier. Jesus' eyes filled with urgency. He said, Jonathan, tell them to begin now, not tomorrow, not when it is convenient, not when life is less busy. Now. Because the deception will not wait. The preparation must start today. I saw people rushing through their lives, consumed with distractions, blinded by routine. I wanted to shout at them, to shake them, to wake them from their slumber. Do you not see the storm gathering? Do you not realize how close the hour is? Jesus said, Many will not listen, many will mock, but some will awaken, some will hear, and for them you must speak. The vision shifted again. I saw small gatherings forming, groups of 2 or 3 praying honestly, reading scripture aloud, sharing their hearts without fear. They were not performing for one another. They were seeking together, and in their midst, light glowed. Jesus was present. He said this is how they must prepare, not through great movements or grand displays, but through small daily choices, a few minutes of real prayer, a passage read with open heart, a song sung from love, a conversation rooted in truth. These small seeds will grow into intimacy that cannot be deceived. I asked, Lord, how much time is left? His expression turned solemn. He said, The signs are already appearing. The technology that will carry the deception already exists. The spiritual climate that will make people vulnerable is already present. The separation between those who know me and those who only know about me is already visible. My heart raced. Does that mean it will happen in our lifetime? He answered carefully. Every generation must live as though it could happen in their lifetime. But the convergence of science and spirit in this age makes the possibility more urgent than ever. The responsibility pressed on me like a crushing weight. I whispered, Lord, how can I bear this? He looked at me with love and said, You are not alone. My spirit will strengthen you. My words will guide you. Speak, and I will breathe upon your words. Plant the seeds, and I will bring the harvest. The vision settled into silence. The images faded, but the weight remained. I was back in my room, trembling, my body weak, my heart burning. It was as though fire pressed against my chest, demanding release. Jesus' final words in the vision echoed in my soul. Tell them to choose intimacy over image, presence over performance, love over ritual. Remind them that small daily acts of love prepare the heart for the final hour. Tell them that when every other defense collapses, love will remain. But only if it is real. I sat in silence, unable to move. The cries of the deceived haunted me. The faces of the faithful inspired me. And the urgency of his command consumed me. That was when I knew. I could never return to ordinary life again. 3 days have passed since the vision, yet my heart has not known peace. I cannot sleep without hearing the cries of those who bowed to the counterfeit. I cannot walk among people without asking, do they know him deeply enough to stand? Every face I see presses the question into me. Every conversation I hear reminds me of the urgency. I sit here now because silence would be betrayal. If I remain quiet, then the weight of what I saw will crush me. If I fail to speak, then the blood of those who stumble may lie upon my conscience. So I speak to you now with every ounce of strength left in me, not as an actor, not as a man of knowledge, not as a preacher, but as one who has been undone by what was revealed. Do you know him? Not about him, not stories of him, not doctrines concerning him, but do you know him? Do you recognize the sound of his voice? Do you sense his presence in silence? Do you feel his love so strongly that even if a perfect counterfeit stood before you, you would know something was missing? That is the question of the final hour. That is the line that separates the deceived from the faithful. It is not whether you attend, not whether you serve, not whether you perform. It is whether you love him enough to know him, whether you spend enough time in his presence that his absence is unbearable. I tell you the truth. Knowledge will not hold you when the deception comes. Ritual will not anchor you when the counterfeit speaks. Religion will not protect you when the false light performs wonders. Only love, only intimacy, only relationship will carry you through. And this is not a love you can borrow from another. You cannot rely on your parents' faith. You cannot inherit the intimacy of a pastor or teacher. You cannot substitute community for relationship. When the hour arrives, you will stand alone before the choice. And only what is real in your heart will remain. I plead with you, begin now, not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, not when you believe life is settled, now. Speak to him as you would speak to a friend sitting beside you. Tell him your fears, tell him your doubts, tell him your desires. Open your heart as though you have nothing to hide because you never did. He already knows, and he longs to walk with you in honesty. Read his word not as information, but as a love letter. When you open it, ask him to speak. Listen for his whisper between the lines. Hear his heart in the stories, his voice in the promises, his presence in the words that stir your soul. Worship not for show, not for the approval of others, but as an encounter. Sing as if you are singing to him alone. Pour your heart out even if your voice shakes. Dance in the silence of your room if your body longs to move. Lift your hands when no one is watching. Let your worship be intimacy, not performance. Serve not out of obligation, but out of affection. Let love compel your actions. Let gratitude shape your service. When you help the broken, let it be because you see him in them. When you care for the weary, let it be because his love flows through you. When you give, give as though giving to him directly. These small rhythms are not optional. They are the soil in which intimacy grows. They are the preparation for the deception that will come. They are the practice that will teach your heart to recognize his voice when every other voice shouts against it. I ask you again, do you know him? If you are not sure, begin now. Speak, listen, worship, serve. Create space for his presence in your daily life. Choose love over distraction, relationship over performance, intimacy over ritual. And share this. Someone you know is not ready. Someone you love believes knowledge is enough. Someone you care about is deceived by ritual. Do not remain silent. Speak to them with urgency, with compassion, with tears if you must. Tell them the hour is nearer than they realize. Tell them the deception will not wait. Tell them love is the only refuge. Do not be afraid to sound foolish. Do not fear rejection. Do not hesitate because of doubt. You are not responsible for their choice, but you are responsible for whether you warned them. Plant the seed. Invite them to intimacy. Show them by your life that knowing him is more than religion. As I speak these words, I ask you to examine your own heart. Are you distracted by comfort? Are you lulled by routine? Are you content with surface devotion? Do not wait until the counterfeit stands before you to discover the answer. Prepare now. Test your own heart now. Press into intimacy now. Because when the final hour arrives, there will be no second chance. When the counterfeit appears, you will either recognize what is missing or you will not. When the sky splits open, you will either rejoice or you will despair. And the difference will not rest on your knowledge or your effort. It will rest on whether you know him. I remember the woman who stood before the counterfeit, her body frail, her heart weary, her soul exhausted. She wanted to bow. She longed for release. Yet she stood because she knew him. Decades of prayer had given her the intimacy to feel what was missing. She did not resist because of strength. She resisted because of love. That is the preparation required. That is the intimacy you must cultivate. Let her story be your example. Let her courage be your reminder. Let her intimacy be your goal. I tell you with trembling heart, I believe this generation may face the hour. The convergence of technology, the climate of deception, the hunger for false peace, all point to the nearness of the final test. Do not assume you will be spared by time. Live as though it could come in your lifetime. Prepare as though the hour is already upon you. Do not wait for signs in the sky. Do not wait for voices on the news. The signs are already here. The deception is already forming. The world is already being prepared. The question is not whether it is coming. The question is whether you are ready. So I leave you with this call. Love him, know him, walk with him, speak to him. Prepare your heart with daily intimacy. Because when all else fails, when every other defense collapses, when knowledge and ritual prove empty, love will remain, and only love will save you. Do not delay. Begin today. In this very moment, bow your heart and speak. Tell him you want to know him. Tell him you do not want to be deceived. Tell him you long for intimacy. And then live as if today is the hour, because tomorrow is not promised. The time is near. The test is coming. The counterfeit is preparing. The harvest is waiting, and the Lord is returning. Be ready. Be faithful. Be in love.